Thank you, Fred.
Thank you. So glad
Uh,
to join.
yeah. So that was the amazing Fred Miller. You can find him at Mr. Hurricane Fred on every social
Yeah,
media, I'm pretty sure.
that's
Uh,
easy.
all right. I'm going to change your role to attendee. Now on to our illustrious guests here. So I'm really excited about today's episode. This is episode 3 of Wide Awake and Listening. We've had some really good conversations, and today we have 3 amazing guests that I think will have unique perspectives on both the present and future of journalism. So Ebony, I'm going to let you go first and introduce yourself. Tell us why you're here, what you do. Oh, you're on mute.
I'm going to get the hang of this one day. I'm going to figure this out. But Brandon, thank you so much for having me. I am a fan of everybody on the panel, so super excited to be here. My name is Ebony Chappel, and currently I co-host a show called Open Lines, which airs on 106.7 WTLC and Hot 96.3 on Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. It is a community talk show. We open the phone lines and let people from the community call in and share their thoughts. And we also interview guests, whether that is people in politics. So we've had the mayor on, chief of police, just regular community folks. So it, spans from there. I also freelance write from time to time, and I'm the former editor of the Indianapolis Recorder newspaper, which is 125 years old this year. It is the 4th oldest surviving Black newspaper in the country. And I am just a fan of storytelling and everything that comes along with it. So very happy to be here today.
Yeah, thank you, Ebony. Yeah, we're excited to have you. Adam, how about you go next?
Yeah, so my name is Adam Wren, and I'm a contributing editor at Indianapolis Monthly Magazine and a contributing editor at Politico Magazine. And I also write the Indiana politics newsletter called Importantville. So my real focus, as I'm able to do it, is narrative journalism and reporting. And so I partner a lot with Michael on stories that are like that. During the COVID crisis, we've been doing a lot more kind of what you would call hard news reporting, sort of newspaper journalism type stuff on everything from the availability of COVID tests to what the pharmaceutical company Eli Lilly is doing in the drive-through testing space, and also how sort of our politicians, not only here in Indiana, but in Washington, D.C., are responding to this. We have a story that we can talk about more later today that's up at indianapolismonthly.com and in the print issue on newsstands right now about the Hoosier connections to the COVID task force that the White House has. And 1 in every 5 members is a Hoosier, from Jerome Adams, the Surgeon General, to Vice President Mike Pence. And so Indiana has a really unique role in Washington, D.C. right now, which has kind of been the focus of my work the last few years.
Nice. Yeah, thank you, Adam. Michael, you're up.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Michael Rubino. I'm the editor-in-chief of Indianapolis Monthly Magazine. I'm proud to be here with everybody, great group of journalists, a great group of civic-minded people, so this is pretty cool. I got my start in newspapers. I worked in newspapers for about a decade. After that, I went to get my master's degree at IU, and so I studied journalism. And then I started working at Indianapolis Monthly, and I've been an editor since 2016, I believe. So again, I'm thrilled to be here. Our magazine is 40 years old, a little bit over 40 actually, but we're still growing, still adapting to different forms, and I'm proud to have the writers that we've had, especially recently in the job that they've done. It's been fantastic. So excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. So how I've started most of these episodes and conversations is I think it's challenging, especially over Zoom, to just jump right into some deep conversations sometimes. So I've started off with some warm-up questions for us, some more fun questions. Going first, I would like to hear a story from each of you about a time that you got in trouble. Now, this can be trouble either just with your parents or with the law, like whatever you want to go into, but I'll allow you the freedom. But I just want to hear an interesting story of the last time or the worst time that you got in trouble. And how about Adam, you go first? Perfect, I know.
All right, yeah, okay. I'll take that challenge. I'll actually tell a story about Indianapolis Monthly. I can't remember where Michael Rubino was at this moment, and who was the editor of the magazine at the time. I think it might have been Rubino's predecessor, Amanda Heckert. But a few years back, news reports surfaced of this California businessman named Robert Vincino, who was buying up old AT&T bomb shelters across the middle swath of America and turning them into like condominiums for the end of the world underground. And I was watching the old Daily Show one night. Actually, it was the Colbert Report, and he was a guest. And they did a story kind of about this these shelters he was building underneath the earth for people to ride out the apocalypse in style. He was putting in like plasma, flat screen televisions, theaters, very nice bunk beds, luxury appointments, and you could buy your spot to ride out the end of the world for $60,000. You know, easy money there. You'd have a spot to ride out the apocalypse. And so I was. It turns out that a History Channel show was doing a documentary on this guy for one of their preppers series. And I was trying to pinpoint the location of where this bunker might have been in Indiana, because the location was anonymous. All we knew that it was in Indiana. And so, you know, I had done a lot of reporting, trying to find out where this was at in Indiana for the fact check. And I actually called the Indiana Department of Homeland Security and asked them if they had a map of like bomb shelters from the Cold War in Indiana. And a couple of minutes after I got off the phone with the Department of Homeland Security, they called Michael Rubino's boss, Keith Phillips, who's the publisher of Indianapolis Monthly, to do a background check on me because they were concerned that I was a terrorist. Yeah. So getting ready to prepare, so, which fair, but I half expected that night to come back home and find a FBI agent waiting to question me, but that didn't happen, thankfully. So
that's a good one. Ebony, do you got anything?
I was trying to think of a good one to share because I've gotten in trouble a lot of times, whether it's just work stuff or in life. I've been people are kind of shocked to find this out sometimes, but I've been a troublemaker for a long time. It's just kind of how I am. But my story, I actually told somebody this the other day because they had posted a screenshot of their Instagram page where they had interacted with Spike Lee, and they asked Spike to do something and he told them no, flat out. And they were just like, I'm still excited that he responded to me. And I was like, well, remind me to tell you my Spike Lee story one day.
Right.
And they were like, I think I remember. So I ended up just giving them a short version on Facebook. But long story short, what happened? When I was at the Recorder, we used to have an entertainment section called Around Town. And for my Around Town story one week, I wrote about a play that was going up that was based on the movie School Days that Spike Lee did. So a lot of people, if you haven't seen the movie School Days, it's a musical. And at one point in time, Spike intended for it to go up on Broadway. He also wanted it to be a television show, but they were not going to let him have a television show at the time because he was super controversial. So his idea turned into A Different World. So if you've seen A Different World, most of the people that were in that were also in School Days. So Spike had like a gripe for years about the fact that that happened. But anywho, so I wrote the story, and I remember asking the director, how did you guys get permission, from Spike Lee to do this? And they're just like, yeah, like, we did it, and it's great, that we're allowed to do this thing, whatever. So they go on ahead, the story gets published about this new play coming to town, whatever. The night that the play is supposed to go up, I am already having a really ridiculous day because the governor's race was happening. Governor Holcomb, after many attempts, refused to grant me an interview for the paper. And my boss at the time, Shannon Williams, published a column basically, explaining that this is unacceptable, that a candidate would refuse to speak with us. And they told us that, oh, he's busy, but he had gone on Chicks on the Right on like 3 times or something. So it was just a mess. So a group of local pastors had staged a press conference about everything, and I had to go to that to represent the paper. So I was already exhausted. I get back to the office, and I'm trying to get work done. And our front desk receptionist calls up to my office and says, Spike Lee's on the phone for you. And I thought she was joking. And I was like, is it the real Spike Lee? Because as all of us know, sometimes newsrooms attract really interesting people that like to call you and write you letters and send you emails and all that good, fun stuff. So I thought it was a joke. So I go ahead and answer the phone. I'm like, this has already been a ridiculous day. What's the worst that could happen? I answer, and it's him. It is indeed Spike Lee, and he is livid. And he's like, I never gave anybody permission to put this play up. How did this even happen? And you called them and told them I said. And I'm like, how did I become the liaison between you and these people that are putting up the play? I don't know them. I just wrote the story, and they told me they had permission. So long story short, they didn't have permission. Spike Lee was pissed. I had 2 phone calls with him that day about it, and something got worked out, and he let them put up the play that weekend, but then it quickly disappeared after that, never to be spoken of again. But that is one example of when I got in trouble. I didn't even correct him when he called me Miss Chappel 80,000 times. I just let him have his moment because he was extremely pissed. And I couldn't believe he was calling me from his personal cell phone to talk. It was weird, but that is one of my getting in trouble stories.
That's a good one, yeah. Any story that involves Spike Lee will take for sure. Michael, how about you?
You want like professional or personal in trouble?
Whatever you want to admit to.
I've probably got more personal in trouble than professional in trouble. But I'll do a professional in trouble. How about that? So, and I didn't really get in trouble for this, but I should have. I probably should have gotten fired. When I was the sports editor, we used to put together the pages for the newspaper, for the morning newspaper. It was that we were putting together the night before. And we had this page, and it was like the scoreboard page where you would have, once upon a time, you ran all the standings, like the AL East and that sort of thing. And so it was agate type is what it was called. And it was very small. And at the end of all the stuff that we would put in there, Major League Baseball, college football, that sort of thing, at the end, there was always a section called transactions. And that was like who got traded to where, whose contract got sold to what team, that sort of thing. And so in the agate type, I started, in one of my buddies who I worked with, we would put our friends' names in the agate type. So it looked like that, my friend Mike Waddle was being traded to the Bears or whatever. So we did that an awful lot, and we probably should have gotten in trouble, but we never did, thank God. So that was a while ago.
That's a good one, yeah. So I was going to tell just a quick story about the one and only time I've been arrested in my life. I probably should have been arrested more, but this is the one time I've been caught for something. So it was the middle of summer. It was like burning hot, like 110 degrees, like August, one of those Indiana summers. And I was 18, I think, or 19, too old, but 18 or 19. And me and a group of friends decided that we were going to open a fire hydrant and play in the fire hydrant because we didn't have access to a pool at the time. Little did we, and we somehow one of our friends had the big wrench that opened fire hydrants. I don't even know where that came from. And so there's this group of us, and we proceeded to do just what we wanted to do, and then immediately got arrested. And I ended up spending, I think it was 32 hours in jail in a holding cell, basically. And then they like let me go because like whatever, right? But at the time too, I was like, I had moved to Indy maybe 2 years earlier. I was on my own. I was not about to call my parents, and so I was just like in jail, right? Like, and so I just got really lucky that they let me out. But that's so real troublemaker opening fire hydrants over here. But all right, so back to the topic at hand, though. So I was really excited to talk to you three, especially because I think you each have a very unique perspective and have taken on different types of projects within media and journalism, and especially in the era that we're in right now, decisions or changes to this landscape are being rapidly fast forwarded, right? So decisions that may have happened 2 to 5 years from now are happening 2 months from now or right now, right? So we've seen furloughs, we've seen people just losing their jobs altogether. I know Indianapolis Monthly just interviewed the editor from the Bloomington Herald that got laid off and is now homeless and writing a blog about it. So all kinds of things are happening to colleagues of yours. And so I wanted to first off start by a couple questions of what do you think, are we seeing the dying days of more traditional print journalism? Or do you think that it's just going to change into something a little bit different? And Adam, how about you go first?
I keep drawing the short straw here.
No pressure.
I think if anything, that the COVID crisis that we're in right now has revealed to us or taught us about the desires to have stories and information in journalism, it is that there's a greater appetite, not a lesser appetite. I think what's going away is old types of business models, or what the coronavirus is exposing is old types of business model. Traditionally in journalism, you have kind of a three-legged stool that supports content. You have advertisements that people purchase. Those have been totally eroded by the coronavirus at almost every publication. Secondly, you have people buying on the newsstand or subscribing and supporting it with their own dollars. I think we've actually seen that part of the leg strengthened by coronavirus. If you look at publications like the Indianapolis Star, the New York Times, others, people are subscribing now more than ever. Just today, the newsletter that I write in Portonville, 35 people have entered their credit card information and purchased a subscription to that. So I think appetite for information is now more than ever. But when you look at the final leg of the stool, classifieds, that's been long gone since before the Great Recession of 2008. So we're finding new ways to, I think, monetize journalism. And so I don't think journalism is going away, but I think individual outlets are dealing with this crisis in different ways. I think corporate-run chain newspapers like Gannett-owned papers such as the Indianapolis Star are going to continue to be sucked dry by the current economic crisis and by their corporate overlords. And that's kind of what we've seen with the homeless editor in Bloomington. But I do think a lot of other publications are going to sort of take their place. I also think that having private owners or owners who have an affinity or interest in journalism is going to be kind of where the future's headed. We've seen that with the Emerson Collective by Laureen Powell Jobs, Steve Jobs' widow. She is building a collection of magazines and publications, for example, the Atlantic magazine, and she's propping them up. So I think in a city like Indianapolis, venture capitalists or local business people who have money, Nate Feltman at the Indianapolis Business Journal, the IBJ is doing great. They're doing okay. They're doubling down on what they're doing. So I think those are the kinds of institutions that we're going to see do well over the next year or two.
Yeah. Ebony, seem like you had thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. First, I think that was a really great assessment of where we're at right now. And there's a quote that I like a lot. I believe the original person that wrote it was Paul Mooney, who wrote for Richard Pryor. For a long time, they wrote comedy together. And he would say, when white people get the flu, black people get pneumonia. And it is so real when it comes to the topic that we're talking about right now. Some of the things that mainstream or what would be considered like white owned media, for lack of a better phrase they're experiencing things now that urban media and black owned media has been experiencing for a very long time, in terms of the loss of revenue from advertisers, just other things. When the economic downturn happened in 2008, it severely changed the way that business was run. So I think that what we're going to see is a lot of businesses pivot to be able to offer different things. When I was at the Recorder, like a huge part of my job was thinking about other ways that we could monetize the products, because we had this product, we had this legacy that people connected with and believed in, but how do we monetize it and keep our doors open so that we can continue to publish? And you see great pieces of our community go away, like the Nouveau, like they pivoted to digital and then that didn't even sustain, so I think that there will be some tragic losses along the way, but we have to look at how to do things differently. I agree with Adam's point about the thirst for local journalism. People want to know what's happening in their own backyard. They want to read those stories. They love this stuff. Now, trying to get them to pay for it is another thing, because people have issues with paywalls, and some people have issues with buying subscriptions and things like that, because they just feel like it should be free. I don't know why, but they just feel like it should be free. So I think that we're going to see a lot of that, and also the rise of people taking it upon themselves, like the journalist in Bloomington who now has started this blog to basically tell his perspective of what's going on. People are looking for that. So I just think we're going to see a lot of pivoting in the future.
Yeah. And with that pivoting, and this is for you, Michael, from an outsider's perspective, it seems like at a larger scale, more journalism, more media is changing to a model of like Vox or Vice or these like more media production companies. Do you think those tactics are where things are going to be headed? Or is there a new revenue model that can work for a more traditional journalistic outlet?
Yeah, if I had a new revenue model, I'm sure my publisher would love to hear it.
Yeah, right.
So, the whole thing is about what the future of journalism is going to be, right? That's what we're talking about here today. And honestly, I don't know what that answer is. I don't know if any of us know what that answer is. We could take a stab at it. But I used to be in the business of, and I'm still in the business of, in the magazine world, part of what you're doing is you're predicting the short-term future, because we work so far in advance. So right now I'm working on like September issue stuff, and pretty soon it will be, October after that, and then so on and so on. It is really hard to imagine what even October or September looks like at the point we're in right now. That's just from an editorial perspective. So I can't even imagine being like a publisher or being the financial mind behind some of these publications that we're talking about. That's really difficult position that they're put in, because overnight, yes, ad revenue has disappeared for places. Subscriptions may be up, but and you may get money from a paywall. We don't have a paywall. So I don't know where that money comes from, or what that model looks like, either editorially, or I have some guesses, or financially. The one thing that I will say is that the future of journalism is completely and 100% linked with some of the most existential problems that we are facing now and will face in the future. The health of the planet, democracy, fairness and equality in our society, what the hell the truth is, objective truth. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here. Those things are really on the table. And one of the ways, one of the things that will be part of the solution will be journalism. What form that takes, I don't know. Will people come to that and will read those things? I don't know. Will they be savvy enough to seek that information out? I don't know. I hope so. But those, when we're talking about the future of journalism, I mean, that's the kind of thing you're talking about. I agree with everything everybody has said. They're 100% right. Like in certain communities, print won't die because print is a part of their daily lives. Like at the paper that I worked at, that I started at, people still wait for the newspaper to come in the mailbox every evening or in the newspaper slot. In smaller communities, they rely on that. That's not going to go anywhere. Magazines are a print product. Magazines, I don't see going anywhere. The print product, it's like a different animal than a newspaper. So I think it depends when you say, will print journalism stay or will it go? It just depends on what you're talking about on a case-by-case basis. But bigger picture, what's the future of journalism? It's like the very future of everything that you care about.
I like that. And to that point of the future of everything we care about and all these local outlets and stuff, I was digging through and doing some research for this conversation, and to my knowledge that I could catalog, there's 168 different print outlets, including school newspapers and all kinds of stuff within Indiana alone. And so that was pre-COVID, so already we don't think there could be some changes to that list. But how does or what are models that like a newspaper in Shelbyville or a newspaper in Anderson or something of that nature need to shift to, do you think, or what are tactics that they need to be doing that they may not be doing, or they may be trying, but to stay afloat or prosper for that matter?
One of the things, sorry, did somebody have one of the things that we didn't talk about is, or I don't think directly, is listener supported or reader supported journalism. I mean, that's slightly different than a subscription model. So we're talking about ProPublica, Mother Jones is like that, NPR operates that way. So that may be something viable to do in a smaller community. That's just possibly one suggestion, or where you have a big benefactor, somebody who actually cares, is civic-minded, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just want to add to that what Michael said. Recently, Mark Benioff, this chief executive behind Salesforce, acquired Time Magazine, and he, is really sort of holding up that once august journalistic institution with his capital. But he's also sort of stepped away and allowed them to cover issues as they see fit, whether that's his business or elsewhere. The same thing has happened with the Washington Post with Jeff Bezos of Amazon. But you wonder in a counterfactual world, what would happen had Mark Benioff invested that money locally here in Indianapolis, where he has holdings, where we have Salesforce Tower. What would it look like for him to, buy the Indianapolis Star from Gannett? And, would that have done more realizable good for a community like Indianapolis, where he maybe would expand the paper rather than reduce it? Than Time Magazine. I think there are a lot of people in Indianapolis who have the good of the community in mind, and I'll just call people out. But, people like Scott Dorsey at High Alpha, or Jeff Baggett behind Cluster Truck. I think people like that need to step forward. And if they truly value journalistic institutions, there's a lot they can do with the power of their pocketbooks to save it. And there are people like that in every community across every state across America. And I think, those people have a role to play as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent points, both of you. One on the membership perspective of having people kind of pay into. I love PBS's model for that, and you mentioned Mother Jones and ProPublica and NPR, which PBS, but yeah, I think that that's wonderful, and also the idea of people that have this access to wealth purchasing. It does make me a little nervous, however, of that happening because whoever rules the pocketbook, if they happen to be some sort of nefarious individual, infringing upon a journalist's right to do what it is that they're supposed to do. So that makes me slightly nervous of that happening. Some other things that I think are interesting to look at when it comes to advertising is creating events. So having advertisers that you work with that aren't just purchasing an ad in the paper or the magazine, but they are purchasing an experience to connect with the readers that you have access to. That's something that I've seen be successful in the past. That's happened both at the newspaper that I formerly worked at and also at the radio station that I work at now, that have helped us move past that traditional advertising model that some people are not interested in. At one point in time, everybody wanted to do videos, and then it changed to whatever else. So, you just kind of have to go with the flow there. But I think creating experiences where they're able to directly connect with the consumers that they want to reach through the paper or the print publication, whatever that is a good thing to look at as well.
All right, I'm going to switch to some Q&A because we got a decent amount of questions, and I think you guys will have really good answers to some of them. One of the questions was, and I think this is coming from our dear governor's daily press conferences, but is there a frustration that journalists feel when you are asking questions and you already described this, Ebony, a little bit about not being able to get an interview with them, but do you ever feel burnt out by that, or or what are tactics that you use to get around that?
That is a good question. I think that people that are, so in the example of the governor, we did our due diligence to ask and work with his staffers and do everything it is that they told me to do, and then to still get a no. So then at that point, we need to call it out and let our community know what's going on. So definitely not above that. As far as the frustrations, I am not in the trenches with attending these press conferences every day, the variety shows and all that. I'm not in the trenches with that. So I watch them. And I also follow the people that live tweet them, and my cat is awake now. But I do not envy you all at all, because back when I was doing that, it was extremely, extremely frustrating when you felt like, okay, they've allotted this much time for questions and they, entertain a lot of bullshit without getting to the points that we really, really want answers to. As far as how to get around that, I love when people get on Twitter and say, I had this question and it didn't get asked, or I didn't get called on. I absolutely love when journalists stand up for themselves and say what it is that needs to be said. Let us behind the curtain a little bit to what's going on, because people don't like being shamed in public. So if that forces them to give you the information that you need to report the stories that people want to know, then more power to you. But those have been some tactics I've seen work in the past. So,
yeah. Michael or Adam, you got something?
Adam?
Just waiting.
Yeah, if we're going to take the example in question, I've been on every one of the governor's coronavirus response calls, and a couple days passed this week where I didn't get the opportunity to ask a question, and I think there's been a sense maybe that perhaps some of my questions have been aggressive. I don't know if that has counted into what's that?
Assertive.
Sorry, I didn't hear. Assertive. Yeah. So that's possible that that's played into it. You know, I for one think these daily press conferences have become, you know, they were remarkable in the beginning for the fact that they were so dissimilar from their federal counterparts when Trump was, you know, kind of taking the stage and talking a lot. But slowly over the last few weeks, they've become increasingly, I think, like Pawnee Today from Parks and Recreation, with Joan Calamezzo, where, you know, you've got like Governor Holcomb like interviewing people around the state, or Dr. Box like doing interviews as if they were journalists. And there is certainly a frustration among a certain subset of journalists statewide that they are, you know, doing this and not giving more time. You know, I think at one point this week during a 1 hour call, only 6 journalists were able to ask questions. So, you know, it's of course difficult for, you know, people in the governor's office to organize these and, you know, field questions. But I do think there's a sense of frustration there. And I agree with Ebony. I do think Twitter sometimes is a helpful tool because, you know, the governor's office are very sensitive to how they're perceived and how they're covered. And so sometimes you can get their attention on Twitter.
Yeah. And then that's actually a perfect segue. We had a few people actually ask, what is a productive and healthy way that either you personally or as a journalist navigate the Wild West of Twitter? Or how you use it as a tool in your trade, I guess, is probably the better way to ask that. Michael, you want to go first?
How do I use it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I use it mostly to promote the work that we do, but I'm not going to shy away from being the person that I am. You know, I don't know if my employers love that. They've never said that they haven't. But I'm going to keep doing what I'm going to do, and I'm going to respond to the way the things I'm going to, you know, I'm going to be myself.
Right. Yeah.
And so have I used that as a tool in reporting? Yeah, I think everybody has. It's a good way to connect with people who can lead you to other people and so on. And it's crazy what that social media has meant to my career. And I would imagine, I can't speak for anybody else, but I mean, it's in some ways it gave me a career as a long form writer. I feel like it legitimized what I was doing. So there's a great good that comes with it, but there's also, yes, it's also trash and garbage sometimes too, and petty and stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know all 3 of you from Twitter originally is where I think I became aware and started conversing and following your guys' work. So I think there's a real value to it, obviously, but it can get you in trouble at times as well. I also don't think you're doing Twitter right unless your employer has asked you to take down a tweet in the last month, which happened to be a lot. So Adam, do you have any thoughts on the old Twitter?
Oh man, I have a lot of thoughts.
You got in trouble on Twitter not too long ago.
You're gonna have to be more specific. I have no idea. I have no idea.
I think when the vice president reached out to you. No. It was Jerome Adams reached out
that's right.
on Twitter, which
I thought was
crazy. I was like, are you serious right now?
Yeah, when the Surgeon General slid into my DMs because he was you know, in the middle of a pandemic, he was very concerned about what a person in Indianapolis, a low-level journalist in Indianapolis, was tweeting. So, yeah, Twitter, like Michael has said, has made my career in many ways. It's been very helpful. I think Twitter has an ability to magnify the best and worst personality traits that each of us has. And and that is good and bad for me. Sometimes as a journalist, I can have a chip on my shoulder, and that comes across on Twitter. You know, I also feel as though I have a sense of humor, and I feel like that comes across on Twitter sometimes. So it really just magnifies who we are. I think there's a perverse incentive structure on Twitter sometimes to be, the most outspoken, brash version of yourself. And, that's a difficult line to walk and can get me into trouble sometimes. And so, I've had, a parody account that appeared about me, as I covered the presidential campaign of Mayor Pete over the last year. I found a new level of scrutiny come about my tweets, and so I'm still like learning and growing from that and figuring out how to use it in the best way possible. I haven't nailed it down, but on the whole, it's been a more positive than negative force for me, I think.
Ebony, what's your perspective in this? Because I feel like there is a niche community that some people operate in on Twitter especially, and I feel you fall into that. So I'm interested in hear what you say.
Yeah, I love Twitter. I got on because P. Diddy got on the Ellen show, like a gazillion years ago, and was talking about Twitter, because before then I didn't think Twitter was a thing that I needed to be on. Everybody I knew that was using it were like tech geeky type of people that I was friends with, and I hardly knew what they were talking about most of the time. So I was like, well, Twitter doesn't sound like a thing for me. But then I saw all these people getting on, so I was like, okay, maybe I should join. So I joined then. And journalists are my favorite part of Twitter. Most of my timeline is journalists. And I think that, I agree with what both of you all said. It's a good place to promote your work and promote the work of others that you support and that you love. It definitely brings out the bad in people. I think, sometimes people want to just hit that viral thing so bad that whatever it takes to do that, they're into, which I think is weird. Sometimes I just like to talk about my cat. I like to do that. I'll do stream of consciousness, just random, like, this is what's on my mind right now, and I'm just going to blurt all this out on Twitter. I try to be careful about that, especially the time of day or night that I do it. Like, maybe you should just go to sleep. Maybe you should do that and not do this. But it's been an invaluable tool for me. It's exposed me to a lot of really, really great resources and great people that I don't know that I would have come into contact with any other way. So, yeah.
Yeah, I do. One of the things that goes along with that, so we were talking about your theme here, right, is the future of journalism. And I guess I'm old enough to use a internet phrase. I'm old enough to remember when I only really had to worry about one thing, and that was like getting a story and getting it right. And there's been so many changes over the years, and it's accelerated so far into things that you have to learn as a journalist just to get your work out there or to present your work in different ways. And it just feels like a million miles away from where we were when I first started. And the crazy thing is that a lot of these technological changes have been good, but they've also eroded at our business in a lot of ways too, right? You've had Craigslist, and you've had, Facebook and their stupid news feed, and just like all kinds of things that the restaurant industry, I feel like right now is feeling. They've all gotten Grubhub, and they've gotten open tabled to death. And then this happened. But anyway, so I was thinking about technology, and it is a great thing, and it is a big part of where we're going in the future, but I'm constantly adapting to the technology and what I do for my work, and never does it happen the other way around, that there's something that's built to deliver what I want it to do, story-wise, or it's a promotional tool, or the tech doesn't start with journalism and go outward, I've got to take something and retrofit it to what I do. And that's becoming a bigger and bigger part of the job almost every single day, is to figure out how to present something. How do we learn this tool in order to make something that's a little bit cooler, or is going to get more people to click on a story, or that sort of thing. It's nuts, but it's part of doing business.
Yeah, and to that, we had a few questions to ask about kind of the amplification of certain news topics, like our president tweeting is definitely right. Like every journalist immediately hits that retweet because they know somehow it'll get them attention a lot of times. And so, and I'm not saying you guys do that, but a lot on the national scene do, obviously. But with that, with more journalism or media in general switching to a more data-driven model, I know there's a lot of programs and different things that tell you exactly like how many people clicked on a story, where they read to, you know, like where they're coming from, on what device they were reading it on, and et cetera, et cetera. Do you think that type of business model where those are the metrics that you're following are affecting journalism in a negative way, that we are going after these negative amplification stories and things like that we know, and this maybe go back to the days of like Gawker and other publications, right, that exploited that model, but do you think that has hurt journalism in the long run, and if so, how do we get out of that in the future?
I absolutely feel like that type of model has it's certainly not helped in certain ways. I think that it has caused some damage. I think that journalists owe it to themselves to really, really think intentionally about what it is they're doing and why. Having data is important. I do think it's important. I don't want to negate that. But I think to craft what it is that you're doing so specifically to like make the data do what it needs to do is wrong. I think it's absolutely wrong. I was on a panel a while ago, this was a long time ago, with other journalists, and there was a woman there that ran a big paper here in town, and we were talking about coverage of the art scene, and she said that they had decided not to cover certain things anymore because it wasn't getting the clicks that they wanted on whatever, you know, platform they use that for. And we're in a room full of arts organizations in the city, and I'm just like, that is so inappropriate because, you know, you're not from here. Maybe you don't think those things are important, but there are a lot of people that do think those things are important. And then furthermore, the way that people use newspapers, the way that people use media is not only what they're consuming right now. We have to go back and look at these things, you know, for a record of history. So when we don't cover things, when we don't pay attention to things that are important because it's not going to get the clicks, or it's not going to do this or do whatever, make money, I think that we do ourselves a disservice. In terms of when you mentioned about Twitter and people feeling like they need to pay attention to everything the president says, no, you don't. No, you don't. Like, it's about deciphering like what's important, what is going to help inform people further. Does it have any benefit outside of this immediate moment right now? I think that we have to think about that. Like, does it have a benefit outside of this immediate moment right now? If not, maybe it doesn't, you know, require as much time or energy as we're applying to it, because this is not easy. Nothing about this work is easy. Sometimes it's like not enjoyable at all, but you're driven by a certain thing inside of you that pushes you to do that. And you understand the power in it and all of that. And before I go off too on the deep end, I just think, you know, being intentional about the work and thinking about what's really, really important.
Gotcha. Yeah. One last question before we go, because we're almost running out of time. I just wanted to ask you guys, if you guys could change one thing about your industry to happen in the future, what would that thing be? Well, I'll start with you, Michael. Sorry.
Like, one thing about the industry, well, I mean, I would like everybody to make more money, of course.
Yeah, I mean, that could be it, though, yeah.
Here's what I want for the industry at large. Is not necessarily what I want the industry to do. It's what I want people to do. And I want people to be willing to pay for journalism. I want people to get at home with that idea, because there's not a real huge barrier to entry. I don't think good information should have to cost a lot, and it doesn't. It's $12 for a year's worth of Indianapolis Monthly. A newspaper subscription is dirt cheap. A subscription to Adam's newsletter is cheap. So you've got to put value in that in the same way you have to put value in your favorite restaurant here in town or the favorite shop that you go to. So I would like people to kind of put their money where their mouth is. Thank you for retweeting our stories. Thank you for liking them, but I want you to actually read them. I care about that more than anything. I want you to get the product. I want you to open the magazine, and I want you to be a smarter consumer about Indianapolis. I want you to be a smarter consumer about the government here, about the people who run things here. You know, that's what I wish people would do, because there's a massive civics gap in this country right now, and I don't know that we'll ever make it up. But one way we can make it up is individual by individual, people who know better, putting their money where their mouth is, and investing in local journalism. That's how you begin to close that gap, because it is humongous. And again, to one of my earlier points, we're not just talking, I mean, this isn't just about an industry going away. We're talking about something that is really going to have a profound effect on the way we live our daily lives.
Right. Yeah. Adam, how about you?
I wish that the incentive structure around creating journalism would change such that we could have fewer stories, but better stories, more richly, slowly reported stories. Right now, there seems to be an appetite, and honestly, not as much at Indianapolis Monthly, which is one of the reasons why I like to write for the publication. But I do think that there's an appetite in the current environment for, quick stories that aren't always, fully reported or fully formed, and there are incentive structures that exist to promote that. But for example, today, like, how many stories needed to exist about Vice President Mike Pence, doing the photo op where he was carrying empty boxes? Yes, it was frustrating. Yes, it confirmed an ideal about him. But how many reporters spent, important rare time, maybe an hour of their time or 30 minutes of their time writing up that story for a website, when, there are so many more enterprise stories that need to be written. I don't know that every Indiana journalist in the state needs to be tuning in to the governor's daily press briefings when they could be, going to a hospital or going to a rural county without a hospital and doing reporting about the coronavirus there. So I would say, changing the incentive structure so that fewer but higher quality stories should exist and really demand readers' attention rather than like watered down one or two source stories.
Yeah. Ebony?
I just want to echo both Michael and Adam's points. I think those were really, really great points. And I just want to see some really strong leadership in journalism. So strong owners and editors that will really, really listen to these types of concerns and make sure that they are doing their part, as a leader in this industry to make sure that that happens. So that's really all I can add to what they said. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. Our city here in Indianapolis is going, and obviously across the country, but we're going through a pretty tough time right now. And I think all of your guys' work is really vital to getting us through this. So I just want to say personally, thank you. Thank you for being on the show. Thanks to Fred for playing at the beginning. That was awesome. This will be up on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. We're now on all the channels. So, and we'll see you next week when we're doing the future of immigration, actually. So, yeah. So we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all. Thank you.